Let's talk about authorizations in this demo. In Jenkins, you go to Manage Jenkins, then you go to Configure Global Security. Secure Jenkins define who is allowed to access and use the system. Let's just start from the beginning. This is for our JNLP agents. We have it on a fixed port 50,000, and this port is mapped to the host port on this machine. So Jenkins exposes two ports, the 8080 and the 50,000 port for the slaves. So when you configure your firewall, you have to take into account that there are two ports that you want to make sure that you limit access to. So you typically block all the ports, you allow 8080 for the users, and you allow 50,000 for the slaves. Then we have access control. Right now we are using Jenkins' own user database. In the next lecture, I will talk about authentication, where we then will change this. I'm going to talk first about authorization, and this is going to be the default for you. Logged in users can do anything and sometimes allow anonymous read access. So if you allow this one, then if you are not logged in, you will see the jobs, you will have read access. If you don't allow this one, everyone needs to be logged in, and only then you can do anything. If you break your system, you might want to edit the config files and put this one on, where you allow anyone to do anything, so that you can come back to this page and then fix it again. What I think is preferable is that you at least have a little bit more security using the matrix-based security. When you enable matrix-based security, you have to make sure that you don't lock yourself out. How don't you lock yourself out? You have to make sure that your user has admin access. So here I have admin and I have admin access here. But if you have another user, you have to make sure that you first add your user and that you give him administrator access. Because if you remove administrator access on your own user, you will not be able to do anything anymore in Jenkins. You will have to edit the config file to regain access. So this is the admin user that I already added manually. Have a look in your Jenkins. In people, what your user ID is. So I have the user ID admin. This is name Edward. You see here name Edward. So that user you want to add here. Once you have more users added to the system, let's say that you have user John, mycompany.com, then you add this user. This user doesn't exist yet, but you can then say, okay, I want to give him access to build jobs. Maybe you also want to give him access to view credentials. You see, you can give him permissions to do things or not. So this is globally. It's really for all the jobs. If you don't want this, you will have to look at some other plugins. But for most common use cases, this satisfies the requirement to only allow a few people to run jobs and some other people to really configure Jenkins. Because remember that developers can add their own Jenkins file, and you can have Bitbucket and GitHub scan for new repositories. So nowadays, the developers shouldn't really be able to make big modifications to Jenkins. They should just be able to add jobs in Jenkins and change the parameters, which they can all do using this Jenkins file. So if you're using the Jenkins file, if you're using the pipeline workflow, then everything is controlled from within your project, and you don't really need to be in Jenkins that much. Don't forget to set up the notifications, email, Slack, and then the need for a Jenkins UI is really minimal. And that's how a lot of companies implement it. You give immediate feedback to the developers. You let the developers configure everything from their Git, and then the developer doesn't spend a lot of time in Jenkins. And that's the way it should be. In the next lecture, I will talk about authentication. So now we are using our own database, but maybe you want to use another user database, one that you already have, or maybe an external system.